All right. I suspect that we will start also having folks come in the next couple of minutes, and already they are. As you know, I'm Shar Berquist. This is Heather Blades, and this is the next to the last campus conflict series sponsored by the Center for Dispute Resolution. Before we get into it, just a reminder that this is also allows you to get Master Advisor credit. And once we know everyone who's here, we'll go ahead and send that information in. As always, we have a book giveaway. Today is on bullying, and the book is awesome. It is called Beating the Workplace Bully, a tactical guide to taking charge. So Cindy, I saw you pop up there. Heather, do your magic. Who's gonna receive the book today?
So our winners this time are Michelle Brashears and Azaria Hogans.
Congratulations. We'll be sending the book out to you. Today's workshop is on bullying, and you are in for a treat because it's a great workshop. I do recall about 4 or 5 years ago, I was in Faculty Senate, and there was a discussion about including in the faculty handbook, or recommending including in the faculty handbook a couple of sentences about bullying. And I remember that one of my colleagues stood up and said, I just don't even know why we're talking about this, because bullying only happens in kindergarten or grade school. And I stood up and begged to differ, because I will tell you that we often have people who contact the center to ask about how can I deal with a bully. So even though it may look a little bit different, bullying sadly is alive and well in workplaces. And why this is such a great presentation today and workshop is because Stephen Spates, my colleague in communication, does such a wonderful job of talking about concrete ways to address bullying. And so I'm going to quit talking and let Stephen take it away.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am excited to see everyone here on this Zoom meeting, taking time out of your afternoon to be here. I really and truly want to thank the Center for Dispute Resolution. Shara and Heather, thank you so much for partnering with me and allowing me to be able to present today. I love this series and am excited to cover several things dealing with bullying in the workplace. I'm glad that you mentioned the idea of bullying. I kind of want to, for those who don't know, go ahead and introduce myself. As was said earlier, I am noted here as in the Department of Communication, and I'm very excited to be a part of this great department with the faculty and staff here. I've been here for several years. And am excited to return and partner with the center for this particular workshop. How I work is I like an interactive space. And so you'll see me throughout this workshop. I may ask for questions or comments. You can place those in the chat or wait until the end. I will allow some time for Q&A for us to discuss and interact as well. And if you want to use your reaction buttons, a thumbs up, a thumbs down, clapping, any of those are fine as well. I do appreciate that throughout the workshop time. So for today's agenda, just to mark out for what's ahead, we're going to talk about various bullying expressions, what it looks like in the workplace, and kind of how that the different forms that it can take. And then we're going to look at a couple real life examples and have some time to be able to talk it through and see how we can do a better job of being able to respond if it's happening to us, and even if we're the observer in the room. And then we'll go into discussing ways to change bullying behaviors and look at some ways that communication helps us formulate better ways to express ourselves and create workplace cultures that are healthy and that are sustainable. And then finally, we'll have time, or I'll do my best to try to leave time for questions or comments that you may have at the end. Again, if a question pops up in your mind, feel free to just go ahead and throw it into the chat. And Shar or Heather, if you can kind of help me with that, just in case I don't see it, or I don't want to miss anyone's comments. So when we think about bullying, it's always good to start off with a good, healthy definition and to understand what we're really talking about in the workplace. So when we think about the bully, we think of this standard definition that we can use, which is a persistent pattern of mistreatment from others in the workplace that causes either a physical or an emotional harm. And so when you think of that, sometimes you may go back to, like Shar said earlier, you may think of those playground days. You may think of those times as a kid where maybe there was a bully on the playground or a bully on the park. But that's not necessarily how we're thinking about the terms of bully. It's different now because we're talking about it at an adult level. And so we're thinking about how this happens in a workspace full of working professionals and how we can actually impact or change the culture of an organization. But either way you put it, you do still think of some sort of person that is a monster in some way. And in your mind, whatever they're doing, whether it be messages or through behaviors, they have made your working life some sort of place that resembles your perception of hell. In other words. And so you're feeling or you're unhappy with the way that you are being treated. And so I highlight those words persistent because it continues over time. So it's not necessarily a one-time thing or something where someone apologizes and you're able to move forward, but it can be repeated behaviors that continue to happen that can change or impact your physical or emotional well-being. But I also want us to look at this to this image and reimagine it. Because when you think about this person, this monster-like figure, they're kind of hard to put in a suit and tie or a professional business casual outfit and walk around. They're still going to stand out, right? And so that's not the bully what's happening. When you look at the research and you look at what's happening, conflict research and communication research will say that the bully is actually someone who has some certain amount of power, that they're also an individual who is professional and most of all, who's successful. So they're not this individual who's necessarily just looking and wreaking havoc and then they can easily leave the organization. They're actually someone who's ingrained and a part of the workplace culture that allows it to operate in this fashion. And so bullies don't have to stand out necessarily in that original image. They actually look like us. They are humanized. They are people who are smiling, who are successful, who are progressing in their careers. And it can move us into a better form of being able to respond and move forward when we understand the humans that we're interacting with. As we move forward, I do want to highlight some of the voices that you'll be hearing. A lot of the research has been pulled from several different institutions, a lot of them communication departments, including our Workplace Bullying Institute, which has some big names tied to it, but it comes from a lot of communication research as well, psychology, sociology, and counseling. Now, why do we want to look at this? There are so many common experiences that individual has, and the Institute says that 79.3 million US workers as of 2021 have been affected by workplace bullying. And so this is not something where sometimes we can experience it and we feel like it's only us. Or it's just happening to us, but there are so many instances that when we think about bullying, it is impacting a lot of different people, and it's because it's happening in different ways. Even more so, organizations have to recognize it and are paying attention because it's starting to cost a lot of money. And this could be through lawsuits, this could be through individuals who leave the organization and they have to spend money to recruit and bring people back in. It could be several different ways that this is happening. So it's very important that we look at this phenomenon and begin to understand how it not only impacts an individual, but it can impact the entire group or the entire workplace culture. From organizational communication research, we talk about this form of conflict happening at different levels. One is an interpersonal level, and that's usually the form most common where we're talking about bullying. It's usually some individual who is expressing bullying behaviors or messages to another individual. It can also happen between groups. This can be between teams or larger teams at organizations, and then even between different organizations. So a varied amount of organizations, maybe a larger, more powerful organization bullying or trying to attack or take over a smaller organization with less power and resources. So it can happen at lots of different levels and in different ways. And I want to start talking about the different ways that we can experience bullying situations. Before we got started, we had a chance to talk about bullying itself being something persistent, but I also wanted to intentionally use the word that it's a strategic interaction. And so these aren't always, a random act that's taking place. A lot of times in some way, thought and effort was put into it. And so it can have different impacts when we think of it as a strategic process, more so than just a random occurrence. Bullying can be expressed or take place through forms like cheating, and that's just taking someone's resources, using them, claiming them as your own, stealing recognition or taking credit after someone else has put in more work or all the work, and then just taking and putting your name on it, saying that it's yours. It can also happen through titling. This is a communication interaction where individuals can take a special nickname or special reference phrase and use it as that person. And it can be sometimes derogatory, or what's happening is that name is to make fun or humiliate them. And so it's used in a way to ostracize and to let them know that we're doing it to make fun of you, to exclude you, to humiliate you in a way. Gossiping and exclusion is also another form of bullying. Research shows that sometimes when that grapevine, although it can be necessary in some cases for organization, can be harmful when it is spreading information in a way to ridicule or attack an individual or their identity or their reputation, or used in a way to exclude or make others not want to socialize or interact with them. Another way that it can take place is through sabotage. These are individuals who are doing things, again, strategically, setting things in place in order for an assignment, for a project, for some form of effort that is done by that individual to fail. So you're setting someone up in order to make sure to see that they don't actually reach their goals, again, towards humiliation and destroying their reputation. Intentional tarnishing of reputations also includes a behavior under strategy where we're using these behaviors or messages in order to destroy someone's professional identity, their career, or the perception of their identity and career in some way. So these all kind of form under those strategic actions. When we're browbeating, we're going under a more of an intimidation route. So we're moving into more of overt ways where now we start doing things like making threats. These are messages where we're going to actually strongly intimidate someone through verbal message. Intimidations, these can be verbal or nonverbal. Name calling, which is a little bit different from titling. Titling, you're using special words or phrases in order to reference someone. Now you're just calling someone a name. Stupid, dumb, lazy, those types of things just out front. And it can happen during meetings. It can happen, just one-on-one in an office setting, those types of ways, but using those messages, verbal messages. Targeting, so in ways, pointing someone out, calling someone out, putting someone on the spot, making them sweat, putting the kind of spotlight on them in order to add a level of intimidation. Those all count under those same forms of browbeating behaviors, and also verbal lashing out. This could be just really letting someone have it and doing it in a way where they feel you kind of take away their power, you kind of humiliate them in a way, and it can leave both emotional scars and trauma during some of those interactions as well. And then we get into high forms as well of bullying, where we're looking at things like assault. This is causing violence or physical harm and impact on an individual. Also damaging through property. So not just hurting the person, but maybe hurting their office space, their vehicle, different things like that that belong to them, overworking, piling on work too much. Maybe they're not able to take a break. And hazing, which are also falls under humiliating someone, but you're allowing them to go through different processes and acts in order to make them stand out, to intimidate, to use power and force over them as well. The problem when we think about all of these forms of bullying, and there are still more, those are just kind of your main examples, the majority of this bullying so far is still legal. And so all of these things that we've talked about, there aren't really necessary repercussions that can happen just yet. Now, the culture is changing a little bit, workplace culture, as we continue to address difficult topics and issues where we can move it into policy. But even the policies that are formed, the research shows that there are still gray areas and muddy waters in terms of how to proceed. And it recognizes that it is still a complicated procedure to be able to recognize and reprimand someone under the form of bullying. So organizations that have been progressed enough to formulate policies are still struggling. They haven't been able to use them to the letter just yet. They're still trying to interpret and understand. Bullying also takes place in a way where we have to understand how power plays into it. So oftentimes bullying situations happen with individuals who are in leadership or management roles. And because of the power that's assigned to that, because of the resources that are assigned to those types of roles, it allows for an individual to use their power as an abuse of power, and individuals can experience bullying in a way where not only are they intimidated, but they may be scared or refrain from reporting or saying anything or responding because of where the bullying is coming from. And so that can cause issues and become another challenge as well. And then I like to use, this is a term that I use all the time in other workshops and courses, but we've been socialized to lose. As kids, when we go back to childhood, we think we're always supposed to do what we're told. If someone in authority tells us to do something or orders us to do something, we're expected to just follow our orders. We're supposed to listen to our parents, listen to those who are older than us, obey. And so we get into the workforce, and if you're new to your career or new to a position, new to a role, your first may be going back to that understanding that just do as you're told. Head down, move forward, and just deal with it, just bear it. And so we've socialized ourselves as a society to reinforce the structure that allows for abuse and abuse of power to continue and bullying to get stronger. And so it can become a serious problem when we don't realize that we actually have the ability to say something and to respond. And we'll talk about what that looks like a little bit later. For that very reason, a lot of instances go unreported or are underreported. Individuals, when they experience bullying, are not sure who to speak with, are not sure how to document it or how to keep track of what's taking place. And so there may be a lot of confusion, again, that gray area, and that can cause a lot of stress on individuals who are choosing to try and respond or to end the bullying behaviors. And that makes bullying itself under an organization's power difficult to stop. There may be some things that they can do where they can put a couple policies in place that allow an individual to be noted or reprimanded as a bully, but there's not always much that can be done to end the behavior itself or to change the culture. There are several other things that have to be done in order for an organization to fully change, and it has to be a cultural change in order for bullying behaviors to reduce or come to an end. Like I said earlier, I'm very, I like interaction. I like us to think about these things because when we think about it in practical terms, we all know, everyone on this call has the basic understanding that bullying behavior should not take place. But again, we have to reimagine and think about what we're saying and doing that allows us to still express or experience places of bullying or instances where individuals may be bullied or we may be the bully ourselves. So I want us to think about it. I'd like you to use your chat function as well as your reaction buttons too. I may ask for a thumbs up, thumbs down. We're going to look at a couple scenarios and try to think of how we can do a better job of fixing this and look at some of these situations and figure out if they're bullying or not. All right, so let's look at story number one. This is coming from Alicia, an assistant professor at University X. They say sticks and stones may break your bones, but words will never hurt you. But in the small department where I'm the only new faculty members, words can hurt a lot. As an assistant track professor, a tenure track professor, sometimes I can get overwhelmed. When I don't have my class materials finished early, some of my colleagues tell me to stop playing victim and call me lazy. One of my other colleagues says, look, you're new. Everyone's always like this. Just step up and prove yourself. Looking at this situation, would you say Alicia's being bullied? If you're saying yes, kind of give me a thumbs up, or you can write your answer in the chat. Okay, I see a few. I'm just looking through. I see a few who have their thumbs up. And Shara, Heather, if there are any comments, just kind of pull me out in the chat. Did anyone say this is not bullying? If you said this is not bullying, put your thumb up. Okay, according to research, we would say, yes, this is a bullying situation because of how she's feeling, the way she's expressing. If you're hearing the messages that are sent, especially, just kind of deal with it. Just step up and prove yourself. Now, they've already brought in a new faculty member there with this idea of proving oneself takes it to another level. Again, intimidating that individual to just deal with it, to get through it and recognize that they are being targeted in a way. Now let's continue. After the name calling happened in front of a group, Alicia confronted one of the bullies. They rolled their eyes and said, geez, Alicia, you're sensitive. I'm kidding. Thinking about this situation, can we say that bullying and teasing are the same thing? A lot of individuals use humor tactics and are jokesters. So if we're thinking about the workplace jokester or the comedian of the group, is it still bullying?
Azaria said in the chat that she thinks it can be, and it's akin to gaslighting.
Absolutely, we can have some gaslighting that's taking place. Telling that person, just calm down, I'll just deal with it, you're too sensitive. Those are a lot of phrases that we're hearing a lot, especially nowadays, as individuals, again, attempt to try to say something or to confront or respond. But in this case, when we go back to the research, when it comes to bullying and teasing, although they're conceptually different, when teasing continues to be repeated, and also is taking place among individuals that don't have, especially that don't have an interpersonal relationship already, we can put that in the realm of bullying. And so what happens is bullying takes place when we have to cast a net. We have to really be able to see that it's covering different things because it happens in different ways. And so what could be teasing turns into a bullying situation when you're repeatedly referring to someone, calling them out of their name, telling them to just deal with it and to step up. Those count as bullying behaviors. And it's not an escalated situation. These are just messages being exchanged on an everyday level.
Cindy says that bullying and teasing are not the same, but that bullying can be expressed as teasing. And Carol was talking about there's a difference between impact and intent.
I really love that. When we have to look at that, and that becomes a part of the complexity too of bullying, is that we have to understand intent versus impact, because we'll see this a little bit later. As you try to confront the issue, to respond to it and to move forward, a lot of individuals will say, I'm sorry, the problem was I was trying to do this, or I meant to do this, but we have to think about still, this is where it went. This is, even though you may have thought about going down this road, this is actually the road that we ended up. So that's important to look at those two things. That helps us realize some of the errors that are taking place, even if it's even if we're the ones who are messing up. Okay, let's look at another one coming from Theo, assistant staff leader. It's hard to believe, but I think my colleague Dash is a bully. What he says to the other coaches and players is pretty shocking. Dash has always been a little bit difficult. He has to be the best at everything and doesn't handle criticism well. But bullying, I didn't think he'd stoop that low. Now, when we think about this situation and this individual, can we, which signs should tip us off that Dash is a bully? Is it that he's quick to assign blame to others, that he's ambitious, or he doesn't accept responsibility for his actions?
A lot of people are putting quick to blame in the chat. And Carol says all three, but especially the first.
Good points all around. I love the comment that all three. Those are all contributors to it. But yes, it would be A or to C. Both have contributing factors. Is not accepting responsibility for actions, but definitely quick to assign blame to others, and not to focus or accept the fact that they are the problem. Let's keep going into that next one. I've been working more closely with Dash, and he's always talking, usually about people's weight. Are you smaller than Dash? Are you smaller than Dash thinks you should be? He'll call you anorexic. If you're bigger, he'll call you a cow. He makes these comments in front of me all the time now. Why would he do that? I think he'd want to do it when no one was around. Is Theo right that bullying usually happens without witnesses? And feel free to, if you want to unmute and say your answer, you're welcome to do that as well, or use the chat function.
Some people are saying it can be with or without witnesses.
Yeah, I agree that it can be both, but I think that the one with witnesses may give that person some power, because if it's not stopped or it's said in a way that is muddied, it makes it hard for that person to realize that it's not okay if it's been done in front of so many people.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you, Azaria. Yeah, and there is a back and forth. It does happen with both, but I think it's important to note that the research is saying a lot of times when bullying is taking place, there are witnesses. There are witnesses. And so when we're thinking about workplace culture, when we're thinking about what individuals are actually experiencing, there are usually individuals who are observers, who are in the room in some way and did not speak or respond either. And so there's a level to that again reinforces the work culture and continues to develop a stronger status quo where people respond to usually, oh, that's just how that person is. That's just the way things are. Rather than going into a new direction and being able to feel comfortable and confident to say something.
Stephen, there was a point that sometimes bullies work behind people's back, and there seems to be some agreement by others about that.
There is. Sometimes, again, we talked about earlier that there are strategic movements so these behaviors, these messages, these things are thought about. There's effort that goes into this behavior. And so there can be a lot that takes place behind people's backs. Again, tarnishing reputations, spreading gossip, rumors, and attacking someone's professional identity, their overall identity, or speaking to their level of work ethic or their professionalism. Those can happen in private conversations behind someone's back, but it can also take place in everyday talk, everyday messages that you can overhear just in the hallway, in an office space, in the parking lot, that are said. And so there are times where we're taking it in just as an observer in the room and not really recognizing the opportunities that we have to also speak up as someone that's hearing it take place and experiencing it as well. Even though it's not being said to you, you are still a part of the experience. And I don't know if that helps a little bit for those who are trying to work through it, but it does impact everyone in the room, even if it's not said to you. I want us to think about casting that net wider I talked about earlier. And if we go back to those instances and add in another layer of complication. And so the stress of bullying takes place and it can be problematic already where individuals are working under high stress situations. If the job itself is naturally stressful, bullying adds more complication, more complexity, and more stress onto that individual. And we can get into forms of emotional labor where individuals' work satisfaction is going down, their stress is going up, and can lead to things like burnout. But if we cast that net wider, individuals, the research shows, also takes place disproportionately when it comes to bullying and happens to women and individuals from underrepresented groups. So individuals who are experiencing stress already from a natural job, the stress of the job when experiencing bullying are taking in other cultural factors that are based in identity and adding another layer of stress that's happening to it, especially if it's a cross-cultural bullying situation. And so that is the male who bullies the female, the white person who bullies the person of color. There are different power dynamics that add an extra layer of complication and stress into that individual, especially if they're coming from an underrepresented group or a non-dominant group. And being in the valley of decision also adds a weight of non-reporting. A lot of individuals choose to cope rather than to follow a procedure of reporting because there are organizations that do have procedures in place. It involves paperwork, it involves meetings, it involves retelling of the story. It also involves a level where individuals are, in a way, are not allowed to believe you yet. They have to hear the whole story. And so you have to go through a prove it phase that the research has can also cause a lot of stress on individuals as well. So managers and leaders have to be aware that when they're soaking in or going through the process of hearing someone's bullying behavior that they're receiving, they have to be cognizant of the fact that this individual is also reliving this and the stress they're feeling outside of their work environment. And it can cause a lot of individuals to just give up and leave the organization, to quit, or to feel that all is lost. Outside of work, you may feel too ashamed to tell your significant other. Those can be signs of definitely, sometimes you're not sure if you're being bullied or if there was just an instance that bothered you. If you're feeling too ashamed to share or too stressed to share, that can be one instance of sign that something has gone wrong. Also, looking at the consistency. How many times has this happened? Oftentimes, if you take a moment and reflect, you'll note that it has been consistent. It has happened before and continues to happen, and you're feeling like it's going to happen again. So if you feel like you're taking consistent time off of work, excess breaks, or definitely pulling from your time off in order for mental health related restoration, that can also be another sign that you're definitely in a situation you don't want to be in. And also feeling sick before the start of each new workday. Just a mental sickness, it could be a physical sickness where you just don't feel like going to work, and it's that motivation that you've lost to be able to start your day. And also starting to obsess over the impact of work life. So you're talking about it all the time, you're thinking about it all the time. When you're interacting with individuals, you find yourself consistently referring to what's going on at work. And it starts to take over your entire ability to socialize in other formats. When you're at work sometimes too, you have a constant feeling of just doom on the job. You no longer feel motivated or happy or satisfied with completing your duties, and your responsibilities feel heavier than they ever have. There can also be some troubles when you're finding out that others have been told not to socialize with you. So there's some exclusion going on, or individuals are saying, hey, leave that person alone. Don't hang out with them after work. Don't include them on the project if you don't have to. Or maybe you're assigned to someone and they say, oh, I worked with them before, they're horrible, I don't like them. And so you're changing or impacting people's perceptions even before they have the chance to interact with that person. Then there could be surprise meetings, last minute meetings where someone is called in and asked on the spot to do something or to perform, where further humiliation can take place. Also, by constantly receiving messages noting a negative work performance. So this often takes place again between those who are in leadership or management roles. So consistently giving feedback saying that this is wrong, this is bad, this is horrible, without providing constructive feedback, without developing a relationship with that person to provide constructive feedback. So putting that person in a way where they don't feel like they can do anything. Instead, they're starting to just pick up messages that they are just not good at all. And that last one is also good as a research note. As an observer, you may be involved in seeing messages like this. So being able to spot it and see it happening to someone else, even if it's not you, taking a look at the type of feedback, the way feedback is provided, how it's provided, and the impact that it may have on any of your peers or those within your organization. When you start to look at how to respond, if you're the receiver of the bullying or an observer, first you have to legitimize it. If you're feeling like you are being bullied, then you probably are. It's good to check in. It's good to speak about it, not just hold it in. That does nothing. It just brews it and causes it to increase the likelihood of an escalated situation. The step two is to counterattack. And it doesn't mean to actually physically attack and go for a punch or to escalate a situation through violence. What it means is you must take action by looking up and following the procedures that are provided for your organization, or finding a trusted individual, because it may not always be your supervisor or boss. And so there may be someone else that you can go to and speak about this to check in. Again, legitimize it yourself. check in with someone else, and begin looking for ways to respond or to take action against this type of behavior to end it. Step 3, if possible or available, be able to take a moment to face the bully. This may take place through mediation. This could take place through a formalized organizational meeting that allows individuals to be able to address the situation that is taking place. That may take some contacting of again, supervisors or third-party individuals who can come in and help bring the situation, to bring these individuals together to find shared understanding. And then step 4, once you begin taking action, always take time to personally heal and professionally heal. Now, we use that term healing, and sometimes people can be rejecting or dismissive of that because we look at it as touchy-feely, or someone just saying, let's all hold hands, or let's all just pray. And those things are good, not to dismiss those things, but there are different ways that you can use in order to go through processes of expressing healing or moving forward in your professional career. So finding out the things that will help you make peace with the situation, if it can be brought to an end, or to find out what needs to be done next if you're an individual that can move forward and go to another organization, or if you have the opportunity to be able to move forward into another department, work with someone else, or reach an understanding, but you want to be able to, at least on a personal level, bring it to an end so that you can move forward. Again, holding on to those things increases your likelihood on taking it out on someone else, or if you switch jobs or switch roles, you'll do the same thing there. And sometimes individuals who were bullied leave to a new facility and become the bully. So there are different, there's a level of importance to step number 4. And when you think about your social support, finding genuine allyship. So we talked about the layer for individuals from underrepresented groups who are often bullied or victims of bully situation in workplaces. Becoming a genuine ally, that is what makes the observer so important. A lot of times, again, when bully behaviors happen, there are witnesses. So becoming an active witness and using communication behaviors that allow you to use your power, your platform in that situation, even if you're from an underrepresented group in that moment, to use your power as an observer to be able to de-escalate a situation or to help empower and support the individual that's being bullied at that moment. Finding support from significant others or family members if they are available. Trusted friends, and those can be individuals in the workplace. Again, it doesn't always have to be a supervisor that you go to. It can be a peer or someone even at another part of the organization. Utilizing, if available, therapists and counselors to be able to continue even after the bullying, if it comes to an end or you do reach an end, to be able to continue that path of getting to a better place. And finding trusted coworkers and networks where you can share those types of instances with. Because we spend so much time in the workplace, our relationships with our coworkers are very important and can become the very pool that we pull from in order to move forward. And I know there's some on the call who find work-life balance or the concept of work-life and personal life very important. So finding trusted coworkers can be very helpful so that you're not always having to talk about work-related things with family or with those in your personal network and personal circles. I do want to open it up for questions for those of you who have some, to be able to discuss how we can do a better job of changing our workplace culture. One thing I did talk about was that we have to do it from at an organizational level, meaning that even if a bully situation comes to a resolve or comes to an end, we still have to think about what does this mean for our organization moving forward, and what is it about our structure or the way that we're operating that may open the door for bully situations to happen. And I didn't get a chance to look at the chat, so I'm not sure if there were any questions that individuals had before, or if you want to unmute.
Yeah, I can start unmuted. I don't think I can type fast enough. My question is, so like what was recognized at the beginning, a lot of these actions are legal. So aside from doing your healing and reporting and things like that, what do you do once those steps have been taken, but things are so complicated because things are legal and people are protected, that essentially, besides just removing yourself as much from the situation, but once again, that's still the emotional labor on the bully.
On the person, yeah.
Right, because now they're having to avoid situations or whatnot in order to keep peace in their life.
Absolutely. And what the research shows is the largest problem that contributes to a lot of these behaviors being legal is that we have not talked about it as an organization. And so organizations without policies are a direct representation or an artifact that comes from conversation. And so we have to be able to address or talk about what's taking place in the organization first before we can have policies and procedures. And so that's what makes it important. And that's why I really wanted to note how important it is for observers, those who are seeing it happen, to not make everything a private conversation. We can be careful and cautious in how we address it as a whole team or as an organization, but we have to have the conversation in order to talk about what's going on and addressing it. And that's the difficult part, is that even when it's happening to us, we don't want to talk about it, but we reinforce that structure and make it stronger by silence. And so that is the number one way to get started, is as an organization, you have to start talking about it. And we've socialized ourselves to lose because we think about bullying situations as someone just being mean to me. And so we dumb it down or make someone feel silly or less than because they are talking about or referring to or willing to report that they are being mistreated. And so it's a difficult conversation, but a necessary one, but the number one reason why organizations struggle with it. But the onus should not be put on the person who is being bullied. That again is a structural problem. That is an organizational problem.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
I can add, I think, thinking of student, and I know this is more of just the workplace, but just even thinking about students who've come to me in the past about a professor going about things in the classroom the wrong way, but knowing that that professor is tenured and has already talked to the department head or anything like that, and that student still needs to get that grade and from that class. I just feel like there's that the structure, and I understand policy is what it takes to change things, but what happens when the policy reinforces the situation?
Yeah, that's a great question, but also a complicated one. A lot of times when we do create policy, we take it as cement. And so we feel that once something is created, it can't be changed, it can't be updated. It is set in stone and there's no way to restructure. And so we have to, as an organization, leaders and managers have to recognize the importance of being able to check back in. Does this thing that we created back in the 80s still stand true for 2022? Does this procedure that we had 30 years ago still stand true for today? Do we need to check in? How can we do that? And so being proactive and thinking about the ways that we're operating to keep us sustainable, to make things natural, have to be looked at, and have to be looked at again and again in the future. And so it's about being able to look at those structures. But you're right, you know, a lot of current structures don't set up. It reinforces one person or entity to feel protected, And so they can do whatever they want, and another entity to feel like I'm just going to get bullied and there's nothing that I can do about it. And so it's being able to have these conversations and set up an understanding of how important it is to check on these types of things and say, where can we improve in the future? What should we be looking at to restructure some of these things? But that is, it's complicated, it's difficult. Leaders and managers are important. Those in power are important. And they have to be the ones to be able to start it. We cannot put the responsibility on those who are asking the questions. We all have to ask that question and seek answers together.
Cindy asks what I think is an interesting question. She says we have required training for sexual harassment, which is a legal issue. Are there modules for increasing knowledge about bullying? I don't think so. And that may be the difference between legal issues versus bullying, which isn't, or most bullying behavior isn't.
Yeah, and even if it's not required, just even having like recommended modules, because clearly from our conversation, this is a topic that, and thank you, Steve, for this, but clearly it's a topic that is not very well understood. And so some way of being able to increase knowledge and understanding and awareness and creating some kind of crescendo into there being policy for it, right? Just thinking about a way to address it.
Yeah, I completely agree too. The difficulty in those is that trying to get individuals to take something seriously. The hardest mind to change is an adult because we're set in our ways and we're stubborn when we don't believe something is happening. So even when we look at a lot of us have to go through those Title IX modules, it's treated often as a checkbox. Hey, you have to do this to work. You're not really doing this so that you have a clear and genuine understanding of right and wrong when it comes to interaction and to touch and to Title IX related responsibilities, but we're looking at it as this is just, I have to check through all those boxes or I can't clock in. And so my fear is what the research says about a lot of those things. When we require something, people's minds go to just completing a task more so than genuinely taking in the information and being able to be aware. And so how it's presented from leadership and how it's talked about in the organization will reflect in the behaviors that take place. And so the overall culture of the organization will always tell the true story of what is valued and what is taken seriously at that organization.
Okay, so maybe we require it of leaders then in an organization. I mean, you can't change the culture without changing how leadership addresses this. And if the leaders are either engaging in this behavior or are allied with people who are engaging in this behavior, there's not a whole lot that the person on the street can do other than to leave, right?
Yeah, and it's you're right. That is the difficulty. Is that again, a lot of the bullying behaviors are connected to individuals who have some sort of power or the resources to feel like they can bully. And so when those things are happening, the difficulty is you need those individuals to change the culture. How your leaders are presenting and speaking to these topics will trickle into the rest of the organization. So it's important to get those individuals to genuinely, to naturally speak to it in a way where those who are brought into the organization have an understanding that those are prioritized and not just kind of tasks that have to be completed. And that takes a long time to be able to change. But I don't want to say all is lost. I don't want to say that it's completely doom and gloom, because it's not. It just takes important conversation, and we have to re-socialize ourselves to normalize also speaking up. We've already socialized ourselves to, I'm not going to say anything because that saying something will make it worse. And because we believe that, we reinforce and strengthen the current the current setup of our organization. And so the only thing to change is to increase motivation on being able to have these difficult conversations.
Crystal, it has posted that LinkedIn Learning has several modules available focused on bullying.
And if that resource could be added in for those that have LinkedIn profiles and have the LinkedIn Learning attachment, that would be another great resource to at least get the conversation started. And a lot of these organizational materials, they're not perfect, but people are putting the effort towards starting to increase awareness, resources, and having these conversations, because it's not something normal that we have in our organizations just yet. These are still private conversations. These are closed door conversations. These are swept under the rug conversations. And that's what keeps things a status quo.
We're almost out of time. Any final questions or comments? Thank you so much, Stephen. I think this is starting to get people to kind of think about, where do we go from here? What are some possibilities? Also, just want to remind you that on April